Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly wild story about a staggering $300 million financial crime, a deeply, deeply toxic family, and an incredible path to self-discovery. It's a narrative that literally has it all: money, deception, heartbreak, and some serious resilience. So let's jump right in.
You know, chasing the approval of the wrong person can cost you absolutely everything. Take our protagonist, Joyce. She grew up in what looked like this flawless, insanely wealthy household. But beneath the designer clothes and the massive private estates, there was a deeply broken foundation just waiting to collapse in the most public way imaginable. To really wrap our heads around this $300 million lie, we've got to look at the brutal, and I mean brutal, contrast between Joyce, who was the family's scapegoat, and her younger brother, Dustin, the absolute golden child. While Joyce struggled with learning difficulties and was constantly demeaned, Dustin was treated like actual royalty. By the time he was 6 years old, he was gifted the entire second floor of their mansion, 3 private drivers, and get this, his own private jet. It's a textbook setup for deep family dysfunction. The emotional cruelty this kid endured is just staggering. Take Dustin's 8th birthday party, for instance. It was completely packed with these billionaire business partners. And when Joyce and her mom arrived a little late, her father actually rushed over, publicly humiliated her in front of everyone, and told her to go upstairs because she was a disappointment.
Joyce was so desperate for her dad's love, she actually went to some pretty extreme and honestly unethical lengths to protect Dustin's flawless reputation, hoping her dad would finally notice her loyalty. Like when Dustin accidentally shattered a maid's sentimental watch, Joyce panicked. To silence the maid's daughter from exposing him, Joyce anonymously blackmailed the family, threatening to have her father fire the maid. She carried that heavy guilt for years, secretly paying the maid out of her own allowance.
And that desperation, it eventually snowballed into a massive tragedy. Picture this. It's Halloween night. Joyce sneaks Dustin out at 8 p.m. By 9 p.m., she gets distracted because she has this brief, amazing moment of discovering her own incredible singing voice on a karaoke machine. But by 10 p.m., that joy is completely shattered. She looks around and realizes there are dozens of kids wearing Dustin's exact white ghost costume. After hours of a frantic, terrifying street search, the nightmare reality sets in. He was gone without a trace. But here's the kicker. Right before he vanished, Dustin actually recognized something super profound. His golden child status was a total trap. He was a genius, sure, but he felt like he was living in a cage, constantly performing for their father's ego. He realized that Joyce's neglect, as painful as it was, actually gave her the freedom to find her true self. But man, for a whole decade, Joyce just couldn't see that freedom. She completely isolated herself, sleeping in Dustin's bed, literally texting his dead phone, while her father's resentment toward her only grew colder. She blamed herself entirely for his disappearance. The house became this silent, oppressive tomb where her mother just wept quietly and her dad could barely even stand to look at her. So out of all this immense, suffocating grief, something shifts. Joyce finally starts building her own identity. It started super small. A music teacher overhears her humming in a bathroom, which leads to a choir solo. Then she meets this local producer named Peter Anderson who instantly sees her raw talent. He helps her book some gigs, a TikTok video of her singing goes completely viral, and boom, suddenly she has this massively successful YouTube channel. She was finally building a life entirely outside of her father's shadow. And Peter, he essentially became the supportive father figure Joyce never had. I mean, he didn't just look at her and see a cash cow, he saw a broken kid who desperately needed a champion. He gave her the exact validation she had been begging her biological dad for her entire life, and under his guidance, her career just absolutely exploded. But of course, right as Joyce is gearing up to move out and finally escape, guess who suddenly takes an interest? Yep, her dad. He manipulates that lifelong desire for his approval to step in as her manager. He sees the money rolling in, and suddenly he wants to handle her finances. Despite her mom's subtle warnings and Peter gracefully stepping back to let her choose, Joyce's inner child still desperately wants to make her dad proud. So she hands him the reins. Well, giving him that trust turned out to be the absolute biggest mistake of her life. She goes to check her bank account one day and she finds out that every single cent she had earned was completely gone. Zero. She had been working twice as hard, touring across the whole country, building this massive audience, and her father had completely wiped her out. And then the devastating truth
literally explodes all over the national news. Get this. Her father, William Clark, had built his entire empire on a staggering $300 million Ponzi scheme, and he had just fled the country. He hadn't just stolen Joyce's money, he'd been scamming thousands of innocent people for over a decade. The man she spent her whole life trying to impress was nothing but a colossal fraud on the run from the FBI.
Overnight, this supposed perfect family is instantly reduced to absolute zero. The FBI swoops in and seizes everything. The mansion, the cars, the entire illusion. The private jets, the bowling alleys, that elite status, all gone. In a matter of hours, the Clark family's shiny facade is completely shattered, forcing Joyce and her passive mother to move into a tiny little apartment to pick up the pieces. Right in the middle of this total ruin, Joyce's mother finally breaks her silence, and she offers this incredibly powerful realization. Joyce had spent her entire life chasing a ghost. For years, her mom had been this quiet, passive figure, just too broken by Dustin's disappearance to intervene. But with William finally gone, she steps up, giving Joyce the maternal comfort she had been starving for over 10 years. This whole situation brilliantly illustrates the difference between toxic blood relations and a chosen family. While her biological dad stole her life savings and literally ran from the FBI, her chosen father figure, Peter, stepped right back in. Turns out, he had secretly saved her YouTube income in an account her father couldn't touch. He helped restart her career and booked media interviews so she could share her side of the story and let the public rally behind her. So, fueled by Peter's encouragement, Joyce steps back into the public eye. But this time, she's not the daughter of a fraud. No way. She's a fiercely independent artist. This mindset shift completely changed her paradigm. She didn't have to carry the weight of her father's sins anymore. She could wipe the slate clean and just let her immense talent speak for itself. Eventually, her father is arrested, facing decades behind bars. And Joyce goes to visit him for this incredibly cathartic final confrontation. She delivers this stinging truth before walking away forever. Unbelievably, even in a prison cell, he tried to blame Dustin's disappearance on her. But Joyce didn't break. She finally saw him clearly, not as some god whose love she needed to earn, but as a small, miserable man. Talk about a transition. Leaving that dark, dingy prison cell behind, we suddenly find Joyce stepping out into the blinding lights of a massive arena, standing right in front of 200,000 screaming fans. She had officially made it. All of that pain, the guilt, the betrayal, it all fueled a career that brought her to the absolute top of the music world, entirely on her own merit. And then, right at the absolute peak of her triumph, the unthinkable happens. A young man crowd-surfs his way up to the stage, and the whole world just stops as Joyce realizes it's her long-lost brother. Just imagine the sheer emotion of this moment. For 10 years, she thought her actions had effectively killed him. But here he is, climbing onto her stage, alive. So the crazy 10-year mystery is finally solved. We learn that the exact same father who claimed Dustin was his absolute pride and joy, he totally abandoned him. Dustin was kidnapped for a ransom that William Clark simply ignored so he could protect his wealth. After a car crash in Mexico gave him amnesia, he was raised by a kind local family, never knowing who he was. It was only when Joyce's mom mentioned him in a viral interview that internet sleuths connected the dots and brought him home. As we wrap up this explainer, Joyce and Dustin's reunion leaves us with this massive, powerful realization. You cannot buy love, and the absolute greatest victory is finally learning to love yourself. She spent her youth trying to please a man who threw away his own son for $1, but the second she embraced her own worth, her whole world came back to her. So it really makes you ask yourself, are you forgetting to love yourself just to please a toxic person in your life? Until next time, keep questioning what you're told and keep learning.